Hello, people, and welcome back to another reading session. This is part 9. Oh, I didn't think it was going to go this long, but we're at part 9 and we're on the last 10 chapters, people. And I'm hoping that maybe I can do it tonight in an hour session. If not, maybe break it down into 2 hours, but we're getting near the end, guys, so that's good. Hope you've had a good week. I've had a good week. I just got news that I've been accepted for a space in an allotment. God, I'm getting old, eh? Such a dad thing, getting chuffed over an allotment space. So when you're getting old. But I'm going to try my hand at growing my own veg, and I'll share it with you guys. I'll probably live stream from my man shed. Hopefully there's a shed up there. Anyway, guys, hope you're having a good week. I'm just having my ritualistic cup of coffee that I always have when I read these things at midnight. Aye, it is awesome. How you doing, Epic? Nice to see you, mate. Aye, I got my own space. I think it's one of the bigger spaces. I think it's 370 square meters. 370 square meters. I'm trying to visualize that. I'll need to go up and visit it, but apparently I'm getting it free for a year, so I can like fix it up because apparently it's in a bit of a mess up there. So we'll have a look. It might be a good project. Again, we'll go up and have a look at the place, and it'll be this fucking bomb site. How you doing, No Mask? I'll be this bomb site, and I'll get to work and put raised beds up and put a little fence around it, and hopefully nobody sets on fire and destroys it. But because I think that's what happened the last time. I think that's how it got shut down because there was some fire in it. Anyway, it's a new project. No Mask, good to see you, man. My 2 loyal subs, always there. These are awesome, guys. Again, like every time I go live, I know there's no doubt one of you guys are going to be there. Anyway, back to the book, and it is by, and if you're new here, guys, we're on part 9 of Irish Druids and Old Irish Religions by James Bonwick. And this was written in 1894. So a good while ago, and it's funny because there's a chapter here about druidical houses. It was talking about druidic houses. And the one they were talking about, I researched. I was looking in Google Earth and everything about it. And they've actually changed it in an Amazonian house. There was meant to be this female Amazonian warrior living in this house, even though it's like in this book, over 100 years ago, it was known as a Druid's house. So it makes me wonder if these were the first churches. And now they're just distorted them, like the Amazon. What the fuck's the Amazon got to do with anything in the Western Isles? The Amazon's house. I mean, it was obviously the Druid's house, but it's actually marked as the Amazonian's house. Where is it? Is it Hertha, Rona? So one of these islands. That's what I'm going to do, guys. After I read all these chapters, I'm going to go back on some of them. Because there's some new stuff there that I've never heard before, and I'd like to visit some of this stuff as well. If there is any old druidic houses, that'd be pretty cool. How you doing, D? Nice to see you, mate. And D is in the chat now. Good to see you, buddy. These fucking adverts, man. Piss off. Right, guys. Sorry for the French. It's late, and I've been working all day. Right, holy bells. Am I sharing this? Yep, I am. And get rid of these adverts. Whack-a-mole adverts. Right. He who has visited Burma or Russia will have no doubt about the reverence for bells and special reverence being paid to special bells. There are fixed bells and portable bells, the last being held in the highest estimation. A special virtue laying dominion over the powers of darkness. Duly baptized bells down to latter days have been endowed with ability to disperse demons. I've never really thought about bells, guys. You do see them in the churches, and some of them are older than the church itself. Some of the churches have been demolished and rebuilt, and the old bells still there. Endowed with the ability to disperse demons. When the Swedes under Charles the 12th defeated the Russians at Narva, the courage of the Muscovites was revived by the incessant ringing of bells throughout Holy Russia to drive devils from the sacred soil. That superstition still prevails with the followers of Shiva in India. Baptized bells possess other powers. Saint Telo brought a celebrated one from Jerusalem that had such inherent sanctity as to make known in some way its detestation of particular crimes. Bells could even work miracles by their enchantments. The children of Lear were said by ancient Irish bards to have been changed by a druidic wand, more powerful than that of a harlequin, into 4 swans. They had a dreary time of it for a few centuries. At first they dwelt in Loch Derg for 300 years. Then they flew to the Sea of Moyle between Erin and Alba, but the poor creatures still inhabited the bodies of swans. Their release, according to bardic tales, was thus effected. The bell that rang in the first Mass, celebrated on Innis Nagluis, the Isle of Glory, restored them to their human shapes, but they were now emaciated and decrepit, and only waited for baptism to flee away to rest eternal. Holy bells of Ireland are of distinct Buddhist shape, being of an irregular cylindrical form, as in India, etc., and not round as in Christian lands. Irish bells were often ornated with crosses, the fleur-de-lis, and the pomegranate. St. Finian's bell resembles that seen in Jain temples of India. A number of so-called St. Patrick bells are still preserved, as in the instructive and interesting Dublin Museum. They are of various sizes, the largest being a foot in height. He is said to have had 50. The sweetest sounding one is known by the name of Finn Féideach. Most of his bells were of bronze, most beautifully adorned with an oriental fashion. The Betakin is half iron. The clog dub or black bell of the saint, an alloy of different metals, is about 12 inches high and 5 by 4 otherwise. The tripartite Life of the Saints records his flinging a little bell under a dense bush, and in time a birch grew through its handle, revealing it to the eyes of Deil. When he drove the demons into the sea at Croagh Patrick, Mayo, he flung after him his bell. It is not certain whether this was the Bernan Brigd or the Dub Dabe Seek. O'Donovan explains the occasion. According to all the lives of the Irish apostle, he remained for 40 days and 40 nights on this lofty mountain, which was then infested by malignant demons who opposed his progress in preaching the gospel in this dreary region, but whom he drove thence headlong into the sea. This was effectually done by the means of his bell. Another account is that a bell was brought down for St. Patrick by angels from heaven when a spring gushed forth at the place. He scared the demons away by it, aided by blows and not by the mere ringing. Aided by blows, so they smack the demons over the head with the thing. The shrines of these cherished bells have always drawn forth much admiration. Miss Stokes, in her beautiful work on early Christian art in Ireland, said, "Such covers or shrines for bells seem to be unknown to any other branch of the Christian church." Among other Irish bells may be mentioned one with a very handsome border. This was 12 inches high, 9 broad, and 9.5 deep. There were the Clog Benecht, the Clog Dub, the Cumaseek Macantles of the Archbishop of Armagh, the Dumra of Fenag, the gapped bell of St. Cullen, the golden bell of St. Seven, the bronze one given by St. Patrick to the Bishop of Clogher, the magnificent bronzed one with gold filigree of exquisite workmanship, and the bells of St. Rudan, St. Mura, St. Mog, or St. Madoc, etc., etc. The Dublin Museum has bells of St. Columba, which had the same virtue as those of St. Patrick in the expulsion of demons, and as the heathens Burmese still relate of their own holy bells. Bells were brought from Rome by St. Patrick, St. Columba, and St. Mungo or Kentigern of Glasgow fame. It is singular that in the ruins of Zimbabwe, of Moshona land, travellers have found some double iron bells. No bell has any charming power until duly consecrated by the priest of some faith. So that's quite interesting, the bells. I've never thought about bells that much, like I said. But I suppose they are important in history. Oh no, here we go. The beach ball of death, right? High crosses, Irish crosses. Come on. Right. How you doing, Jamie? Nice to see you, mate. Probably need to shut some of these windows down that I've got open. Who could write the history of the cross? It is the most ancient and the most deeply reverenced of all religious symbols. To the men dwelling beside the Nile or the Euphrates, to the inhabitants of India, to the east of Mexico, to the west, to those sojourners in Egypt before the Great Pyramid was built, not less than to modern Christians, the cross, whatever may have been the meaning attached to it, in the ever-changing systems of faith, has been a source of wonder, of mystery, and of comfort. When the Christians assaulted the Osirian temple at Alexandria and with a destructive force entered its sacred precincts, they saw a huge cross occupying the marble pavement. Great, too, was the surprise of the Spaniards to find the same emblem in the temples of Aboriginal America. The Tau, or cross, meets one's view in the ornamental relics of many lands. Ancient Ireland was no exception in the display of cruciform objects. The Edinburgh Review of 1870 truly said, "It appears to have been the possession of every people in antiquity, the elastic girdle, so to speak, which embraced the most widely separated heathen communities, the most significant token of a universal brotherhood. It can, it adds, be traced to the remotest antiquity and is still recognized as a military and national badge of distinction. The Reverend A. Hislop, in his Two Babylons, boldly asserts that the cross was known to Adam. It is strange that the chosen people should have preserved no tradition of it, and that the only mention of it in the Old Testament, Ezekiel 9, should be a mark or tau on the forehead of idolaters, as may be seen to this day in the bazaars of India. Baring Gould thinks it is more than a coincidence that Osiris, by the cross, should give eternal to the spirits of the just. Is he not here confounding the archetypal emblem with the antitypical? Oliver, the authority on Freemasonry, ventures this connection between pagan and Christian crosses. The system of salvation through the atonement of a crucified mediator was the main pillar of Freemasonry ever since the fall. Were this true, popes need not have excommunicated the brotherhood. The Spaniards saw the Indians bowing to the cross in worship. It has been found on the breasts of statuettes from the Indian cemetery of Jingalpa, Nicaragua, of unknown antiquity. Tablets of gypsum in Mexico bore it in the form of that cross adopted by the Knights in Malta. The Peruvians and Babylonians had the Maltese cross. The Druids were said to have made their cross of the stem and two branches of the oak. The Buddhist Tau or swastika is a cross, having sometimes a cavalry with buds and leaves. The tree of immortality in the palace of Assyrian Khorsabad forms a cross. Etruria and Pompeii exhibit the same symbol. The reviewer of 1870 says, "Our commonplace book contains nearly 200 distinct representations of the pre-Christian cross. Only in recent days have British Protestants cared to use the cross. Now it may be seen on in Methodist and Nonconformist chapels. It was once thought distinctly papal in origin, but Tertullian, Jerome, and Origen notify its use in their day. Processions in its honour were known in the 5th century. Cyprian records its use on the brow in baptism. The first Protestant prayer book, Edward VI, ordered its mark on the infant's breast and forehead. The whole Christian world has either bowed to it or raised but a feeble voice against its use. Ireland has been and is the very land of crosses. Long before St. Patrick came to its shores, wise men from the east had brought it in Mediterranean galleys. What did the Irish think of the cross? What elevating ideas did it convey to them? Was a pre-Christian emblem anything to the mass of the natives or pertaining only to the foreign settlers encamped upon their coast? Did Irish Druids, mixing more with the people, adore the cross, as was the custom with the British Druids? To the Christianized Irish, whether Chaldees or not, it was a symbol of the once suffering but now exalted one. And bowing to it, they beheld the image of their Saviour and indulged the hope of a happier home beyond. If the heathen cross came to them from the east, it was from the east it afterwards approached them with a higher and nobler faith. The pagan crosses, being just the same in appearance as those subsequently introduced by Christian missionaries, we may responsibly be puzzled to distinguish one class from the other. Dr. Graves, Bishop of Limerick, compared Irish and Coptic crosses. These, said he, were brought into both Egypt and Ireland from Palestine, Syria, Asia Minor, Byzantium. He found Oriental crosses with or without circles and Ogham Irish monuments. Wakeman, in his Irish inscribed crosses, believes they were used by the people of Erin as a symbol of some significance at a period long antecedent to the mission of St. Patrick. Rubbings from the stones on the island of Innismurray of Sligo, overlooking the Atlantic, led him to say, "We have the elements of all, or nearly all, spirals, chevrons, lozenges, cups and dots, crosslets, foliage, cable, wavy and other mouldings upon cinerary urns, golden or bronze ornaments and implements, and most notably upon megalithic structures associated with the practice of cremation, all of which are beyond the range of Western history." Pre-Christian crosses he identifies at Douth and Newgrange upon the Boyne, Knockmany of Tyrone, Deer Park of Fermanagh, Clover Hill of Sligo, Slieve na Calais near Lough, Crew of Meath. These are like the heathen inscriptions in Scotia Minor or Lesser Ireland, which we know now as Scotland. Tuatha De Danann crosses are associated with snakes and are not likely to be Christian ones. The Tuath ones resemble those of Buddhist countries. That of Kilcullen, County Kildare, bears the figures of 9 Buddhist priests in Oriental garb, and even with a sort of Egyptian beard. Keane of Round Tower Story writes, "Goban Sayer means the sacred past or the Freemason sage. One of the Gubres or Kabiri, such as you, have seen him represented on the Tuatha De Danann cross of Clonmacnoise. The latter was adorned with birds and other animals." Clonmacnoise was a sacred spot before Christianity came. It is 10 miles from Athlone in Kings County. The North Cross, 13 feet high, bears carvings of priests or brehons. The South Cross, 12 feet, has some splendid figures of birds, deer, etc. There are staves with bunches of leaves. A dog appears among the animals. That would have no meaning with a Christian cross, but the sacredness of that friend of man in Zen books classes that cross among those of Oriental origin. The human figure has an Eastern look, fully clothed and crowned. It holds two scepters crossed in the arms with crosses at the top. That Clon Macnois was a sacred spot is evident by the two remaining round towers there. Its sanctity was continued, though in a Christian channel. And like I said, guys, it'll be interesting to look now, over 100 years later, since this book was written, at this area, this Clon Macnois, or these towers, if they're even there anymore. Because I wouldn't be surprised if they just cleared them away now. Right. Its sanctity was continued, though in a Christian channel. Besides the cathedral, there are remains of 9 churches. The author of the Round Towers of Ireland is led to exclaim, "Within the narrow limits of 2 Irish acres, we have condensed more religious ruins of antiquarian value than are to be found perhaps in a similar space in any other quarter of the habitable world." That writer is disposed to see proofs of some connection between the ancient Irish faith and that of the Zendavesta of Cyrus. Referring to the dog on those crosses, he says, the personation of a dog, their invariable accompaniment, as it is also found among the sculptures of Persepolis and in other places in the East, would in itself be sufficient to fix the heathen appropriation of these crosses, as that animal can have no possible relation to Christianity, whereas the Tuath de Danann, it was accounted sacred, and its maintenance enjoined by the ordinances of the state. Buddhist crosses are well known throughout the East. The Reverend Ernest Eitel of Hong Kong, describing one on Amitabha Buddha, writes, "It is exactly the same diagram which you may have seen engraved on ancient church bells in England, and which learned antiquarians invariably declared to be the hammer of Thor, the Scandinavian god of thunder. Perhaps also you remember to have heard that among the German peasantry and in Ireland, the same figure is used as a magical charm to dispel thunder. Well, you turn to your friend, Chinese. What is the meaning of this? He informs you that it is a mystic shibboleth of the believers in the Western paradise, an accumulation of lucky signs. Anyhow, it has a different significance to that we now recognize in the cross. One need not be alarmed at the discovery that not only the cross, but the crucifixion was a sacred symbol many hundreds of years before the faith of Jesus. Yet, in Christianity, a different and more moral and elevated idea became associated with the figure of a crucifix. Mithras, as the sun, is represented as crucified at the winter solstice. Vishnu, Buddha, and Indra were also said to have been crucified on the cross. The Scandinavians had the crucifixion of the sun ceremony on the shortest day. Ireland, like other lands, had pre-Christian crucifixions. The most remarkable one seen by us was that of Glendalough. The Persian headdress and the ancient kilt were observed with the oriental crown. That character was afterwards imitated in Christian times as some purpose down to the 12th century. Clon Macnois has the figure fully clothed and crowned. The figures at Knockmoy, Galway, and Cashel wear the kilt of the East. As has been remarked, the Hindu Puranas corroborate to an iota this our Knockmoy crucifixion. That of India refers to the death of Sulahana upon a tree. So there we go. That of India refers to the death of Suliohana upon the tree. Suliohana. And like I was saying before, guys, the Celts had Hesus, who was killed upon the tree or sacrificed upon a tree. The Knockmoy figure has the same sort of philabeg or kilt as the one worn by the arms extended deity in Nubia. Another peculiarity noticed in some of the Irish pre-Christian illustrations of the crucifixion is the absence of nails. And I've seen this before, people, like just a guy standing with his arms open. It doesn't even look like the guy's crucified. He's standing at a cross, but he's more like he's greeting you with a hug. It looks like a greeting rather than being crucified. The legs being bound with cords at the ankles. Cords also pass around the chest and under the arms. The arms are not fully outstretched, but rather hang downward. At Monaster Boyce, the figure is bound by cords. As Keane observed, such a mode of representing the crucifixion never could have occurred to the early Irish Christian missionaries and bishops, who are universally allowed to have made the scriptures their chief study. So I wonder if, see, when they did sacrifice to these Celtic gods like Jesus, I don't think they would have whacked nails through their feet. They probably would have tied them up with rope on the tree and then killed them. So that sounds more likely rather than driving these big nails through the feet. I never really got that. Why you would drive? Again, if you're going to hang somebody up, why drive the I never really got that. Pads on the chest, under the arms. Scriptures, the crown resembles that worn by the goddess Diana. Keane is pleased to say of the whole, it represents the Cuthite crucifixions of primeval tradition. The Cuthite, or what if it represents the Celtic, with the Isus. The Irish shrine of St. Mankin led the same writer to add, the crucified figure in the sculptures from a Persian rock temple may assist in explaining the mummy-like figures on the Irish shrine. The similarity of the design would seem to confirm the idea that the figures were intended to signify the inmates of the Ark undergoing the process of mysterious death, which was supposed to be exhibited in Arkite ceremonies. O'Brien's round towers, which, with the exception of some extravagancies, has been largely approved by the learned, alludes to bronze crucifix with arms extended and with an oriental crown and kilt, in these words, could not have been intended for our Saviour, wanting besides the INRI and wearing the Iranian royal crown instead of the Jewish crown of thorns. Therefore, we are justified in ascribing it to its owner, Buddha, whom again we find imprinted in the same crucified form. The supposed Virgin and John figures on one of the round towers he declares to be Rama and Buddha's mother. Well, whoever this is declaring that, I can maybe say I'm declaring the same for the Celtic stuff. Like a lot of these people are Celtic gods rather than Buddhist, because I hear this coming up a lot in like the Buddhist stuff. And I think it's more linked to the British gods, because Isus hasn't been mentioned that much. Once, I think he was Jesus, but there's lots of parallels with Jesus and Jesus and the tree and the sacrifice. And anyway, where was I? It talks about Buddha quite a lot. It is singular that the dress of one crucified figure, as worn about the loins, corresponds with that of the fabled crucified Krishna. The Christian artists who, as seen in the beautiful works of ancient Irish art, borrowed so much from the East, should imitate Oriental pre-Christian crucifixions, ought not to surprise us. Christian symbolism is generally borrowed, with new adaptation, from heathen mythology. But what makes this person think that this heathen mythology is Eastern? It might have been Eastern and it been brought over like thousands, because everything was Eastern at one point, wasn't it? Like the whole of Europe was like covered in ice, and like everybody had to came for the like Middle East at some point. So it's easy to say that everything's Eastern at some degree. But just to keep saying that all these symbols and all these gods have came from Buddha or came from the East, again, a lot of these could be homegrown. But Like I said, the Isle of Lewis, and that Shawnee story in Saint John. Saint John came from Shawnee, and this was a local tradition up in Lewis. It was local, so it's not came from the east. It's not came from Buddha. It's homegrown. It's came from the Celtic gods, and it's manifested as saints. And this is the parallels I keep finding. I didn't find it much with Buddha, but of course, most theologies have got parallels. But I'm looking at Scotland, and I'm looking at Druidism, and I'm looking at Christianity, and there's so much that like fall in line with each other, all the different stories. It's maybe my ignorance toward Buddhism. Maybe I've not read enough of Buddhism or looked enough at Buddhism to go, look, all these parallels. But I find it more in the British and the European stuff rather than the Far East. Anyway, let's see, how big's this chapter? Oh, it's quite a big one. Right, before Irish exposed virgin. Right. No Mask Epic. Good stuff. Seahenge. There is a place near me called Seahenge. It's a strange story. The story is it was an upturned tree to leave bodies on, but no idea what the circle was for. They carried off to a museum, they say. That is strange. Right. Wearing a crown. Christian. So here, it is singular that the dress of one crucified figure is worn about the loins. I've read this already, but I'm just going to read it again. Corresponds with that of the fabled crucified Krishna. That Christian artists who has seen the beautiful works of ancient Irish art borrowed so much from the East should imitate Oriental pre-Christian crucifixions ought not to surprise us. And this is what I think is the misconception here, that these are Oriental. Christian symbolism is generally borrowed with new adaptation from heathen mythology. Miffer, the late Welsh art druid, like when did he die? Like, has the explanation of the mystery, viz., who of light died on the cross at the equinox, descending to the southern hemisphere, and was reborn at Christmas when rising towards the northern summer lands. Scotland, peopled by the same race on its western side as Ireland, had the like veneration for stone crosses. Donald Clark, a Gaelic scholar, derives Inverary from the River Erie, and Eirad worshipped. This place, says he, is still called Crois na Slucht, kneeling cross, because the pilgrims on arriving there were wont to kneel in prayer. Before, however, they arrived there, they had to ford the river Array at a point where the cross came in sight, and in sight of the cross, they, Era, worshipped, and the stream was from this association called Usk, Erad, water of worship. Not simply Erad, worship. Excuse me. This is going to be a couple of videos again, eh? It's a huge chapter. One cross of Kintyre is made of 4 round bosses, with a 5th in the centre. At Cales of Kintyre, the cross is highly sculptured. A winged figure appears in the top compartment, and the centre is circular, with 3 bosses inside, surrounded by 4 dogs. Captain White finds the conical or pyramidical weather cope on so many of the Irish crosses is conspicuously absent in the Scottish examples. He observed, however, that the primitive kind of 4-holed cross met with Knapdale, Kintyre, is common to Wales, Cornwall, Cumberland, and other western districts. His remarks on serpent crosses are as follows. The representations of serpents, so prevalent in the one set of sculptures, Irish, are almost unknown to the other, though on the eastern pillar shafts they so frequently appear. I cannot recall a single instance of a serpent delineated on a West Highland ecclesiastical carving in the mainland districts I have traversed. It appears, however, on a cross in Islay and one in Iona. The open wheel, so prevalent in Ireland, occurs, according to Captain White, but thrice in Scotland. Eugene Hutcher in L'Art Gaulois has some remarkable illustrations of the cross among a kindred people to the Irish across the Channel. It is there associated with a pig, lion, serpent, eagle, winged horse, bird, chariot, pig, under a horse, fleur de lis, etc. The Gaulish coins have the cross frequently impressed on them. Some Irish crosses are distinguished by the Buddhist symbol in all sorts of positions. The triple tau of India is equally manifest. The Thor's hammer cross is very common among the other pre-Christian crosses. Fosbrook affirms that there are 22 instances of the cross of Ogham stones, but none on the 53 inscribed stones in Rath Chambers. It is his opinion that stone crosses owe their origin to marking Druid stones with crosses in order to change the worship without breaking the prejudice. The Irish cross within a circle has been seen not only in the Far East but in the Indian mounds of Ohio. The Druids' cross is fully acknowledged in the two Babylons of the Reverend A. Hislop. The form of the Philistine Dagon is detected in the sculptured mermaid on Meath's cross and at Clontarf Cathedral, where the fishwoman has a forked tail. The Tau, mentioned in Ezekiel, is declared by St. Jerome to have been a cross. The base of the cross at Kells, County Meath, has a figure of a centaur with a trident, another centaur behind it armed with a bow and arrows, birds, fishes, and a sacred hare. The sandstone cross of Arbo by Lough Neagh, 20 feet high, is covered with men and horses, trees, and serpents. That of Monaster Boyce, 23 feet in height, has figures on the panels. Brash has interesting records of the sculptured stones of Ireland. He describes those of Kilkenny and Clonmel of sandstone, having in the centre of one, coiled around the boss, 4 serpents. On the panel of the left arm is a hunting scene. On the right are chariots, horsemen, and dogs. A human head had a forked oriental-looking beard. This is oriental-looking beard. Lucan mentions that the Druids wrote over the cross, Pandaran, Lord of Thunder, bearing Jesus, or who, on the right arm, and Belai on the left. Mrs. Wilkes, in her Ireland of the Ur of the Chaldees, has thus declared her views. The cross has a symbol is traceable to the crossed rods of the Chaldean shepherd kings, as ancient as the fish and the serpent signs, and as the ring and cup cuttings to be seen on the stones of Scotland and Ireland. And that's a book I've read, guys, Ur of the Chaldees. Ireland, the Ur of the Chaldees. Mrs. What was her first name? Is it Catherine Wilkes? I can't remember, but it's an interesting book. Fish and the inhabitants of Erin, previously to the arrival of St. Patrick, were well acquainted with the cross as a symbol. Further, she writes, as we find the Christian emblem was a general among the Druids, no one needs fear assigning to many of the crosses of Ireland and Scotland a period far anterior to the introduction of Christianity. The Cran Torre or Cross Torre, the fiery cross, which was carried through the Highlands 30 miles in 3 hours in the year 1745 at the Stuart Rebellion, was known in very remote times among the Western Celts, as it still is in India. When dipped in the blood of goats and bearing a flame, it was a message of alarm among the wild tribes. A serpentine figure was often twisted around the cross in heathen times. It is curious to find that the pagan crosses of central India resemble many still existing in Cornwall and Ireland. A St. Andrew's cross marked the ancient holy cakes of Egypt. A Buddhist god bore the cross and trident in his hand. The Emperor Decius had the cross on coins, or Decius. Some of the early fathers were led to call the old heathen cross an invention of the devil. The cross of Finglas has a romantic history. It was exhumed in 1816 after having been buried for ages. Its cross was represented in a sun figure as in Egypt. There were marks of the snake about it, though much defaced. So what's this? The cross of Finglas. I'd like to research that actually. I'm going to research it right now. Just for instance, the cross of Finglas. Let's see if there's any the cross of Finglas. Oh. So we research here, guys. Oh, there it is there. So this is what I was talking about, guys. I'm going to go back and research some of this stuff. The Nether Cross, Fingless High Cross. So Saint Canis, a friend of Saint Columba and one of the 12 apostles of Saint Finian, who founded the well-known school at Clonard, established a monastery in Finglas in the 6th century. In the 9th century, the early Christian carved a granite cross in the image of one carried by Saint Canis. The 7-foot-high Nether Cross, or Lower Cross, stood on the northern boundary of the village on the grounds of the abbey at a place which is still called Watery Lane, until word spread that Cromwell had landed at Ringsend in 1649. The townsmen quickly dismantled and buried the cross in the graveyard, disguised as a new grave, to protect it from desecration by Cromwell's troops. The cross remained buried for 160 years. Robert Walsh, in his book Fingal and its Churches, explains how his grandfather, the Reverend Robert Walsh, became curate of the parish in 1806. He was subsequently vicar of it. He was a man of literary and antiquarian pursuits. The oral tradition of the burial of the cross having reached his ears, he resolved, if possible, to trace it to its foundations. His search was rewarded. He discovered an old man who told the family story as handed down to him. His grandfather, when a boy, had been present at the burial of the cross in a corner of one of the glebe fields. Dr. Walsh proceeded with some workmen to the spot indicated in the traditional story. In due time, he unearthed the cross from its resting place of 160 years, and it had erected in the southeast corner of the ancient graveyard where it now stands. Just north of the cross is the ancient church of St. Canis, now in ruin. Situated in St. Canis graveyard at the junction of the R13 Finglas Road, Wellmont Road, Barrack Lane, leads to the lock gate of the graveyard. That's pretty cool. How you doing, Ulrich? Nice to see you. Right. So the cross of Finglas. So it still exists today, guys. It's got a romantic history. It looks pretty worn though. That's like since this book was written, that's over 100 years, so it looks pretty worn down. We need to have a closer look at it, but I'm going to get on with the book anyway because it's 1:45. Right. The so-called Druidic Temple of Newgrange, one of the most wonderful monuments of old Ireland, as in the form of a Latin cross. There are 4 angled crosses or filefots within a circle. The emblem, seen also on cromlechs, may be a reminiscence of Baal or of the Scandinavian Thor, being associated with crosses. The pyramidical cross observed at Newgrange was known in countries as far apart as India and the Tonga Isles. Everyone knows that the several deities of ancient Egypt are recognized by the cross they hold in their hands. They who would study the subject further may consult O'Neill's Irish crosses and Rope Brash's sculptured crosses of Ireland by comparing the information therein with accounts of Egyptian, Persian, Phoenician, Babylonian, Hindu, and other ancient crosses. The conviction will be strengthened that, from whatever sources derived, Ireland was acquainted with the cross as a religious emblem of some sort long before the Christian era. Right. The Sacred Hill of Tara. So this place comes up quite a lot. Very important old Irish history. Very sacred spot. Tara. Right. Tara, Temor, Temur, or Temoria is intimately connected with the early religion of Ireland and has been associated with singular theories. As Timur, it was a mount or home of Queen Tia, wife of the Milesian king Heremon, the centre of Druidical song and power, the seat of ancient royalty. Tara was a favourite subject of glorification by ancient annalists and has been immortalised in the poem of Moore. But, while bards record a great assembly being held there 921 BC, Dr. Petrie, the eminent antiquary, is disposed to regard the place as existing only between 200 and 300 years after Christ. The high civilization at Tara has been a favourite subject for bards. The old lady guide at Tara told us that only gold and silver. Sorry, guys, this bloody advert's distracting my eye. I won't get rid of this. Jesus. The old lady guide at Tara told us that only gold and silver vessels were used at the banquets. Dr. Ledwich laughs at the yarns about its 27 kitchens and its amazing bill of dairy fare. He assures us that the story of Tara rests only upon the fragments of a fragment in the Seabright collection that had neither the name of its author nor a date. The earliest Romish ecclesiastics, and medieval writers knew nothing of early Irish culture or wealth. We must refer to the works of Dr. Petrie for a description of the several halls, mounds, rafts, cairns, and tombs still to be traced and distinguished appellations connected with heroes and prophets of old. The faiths, or Irish parliaments, were wont to meet in the so-styled banqueting hall. An ancient Celtic bard had this account of the grave of the queen that came from Spain. Teffy was her name. She excelled all virgins. Wretched for him who had to entomb her. 60 feet of correct measurement we marked as a sepulchre to enshrine her. The Tara stone, or the Dalan, stone of destiny, referred to by writers of the 10th century, is declared by Dr. Petrie to be the cylindrical obelisk still seen 6 feet out the ground with other so-called Druidical monuments. The tourist is shown the spot where Lucad, the Druid, was burned in the house from which Benin, St. Patrick's disciple, had escaped. The story, as told in Latin by Macuthenius, contains one of the traditions connected with the reputed life of Ireland's apostle and illustrates the contest at Tara between the saint and the Druids. All these things can be done in the sight of the king between the magicians and Patrick, the king says to them. Cast your books into the water, and him whose books shall escape uninjured we will adore. Patrick answered, I will do so. And the magician said, I am unwilling to come to the trial by water with that man, because he has water as his god, alluding to baptism. The contest was to be settled, therefore, by fire. A house was constructed of boughs, half green, half dry. The magician went into the green part and Benin into the dry. The fire came and consumed the green with the Druid, but the Christian was not hurt. Other stories connected with the preacher at Tara are narrated elsewhere in the present work and related to a period subsequent to the institution of the Olam Fodla College at Tara, but the modern school of Anglo-Israel attach other ideas to that ancient seat of sanctity. Heber of the bards is to them Hebrew. Tara is the name for Terah, Jeremiah fled thither after the siege of Jerusalem, carrying away the treasures of the temple, as the ark, the scepter of David, the Urim and the Thummim, and others. Some persons at this day affect to believe that in the hill of Tara might yet be found these memorials of Judaism, and hope to recover thence David's harp, carried to Ireland by Jeremiah and the Princess Scotta, daughter of the Pharaoh. Ooh. I hear that being mentioned quite a lot, Scotta. But like the person said, these are ideas by Anglo-Israelis. So it was like a movement. The Reverend F.R.A. Glover, M.A., has no doubt about its possession of the sacred stone, saying, "The foundation pillar, which the Jews regarded for 600 years with veneration as Jacob's pillow, in their temple on Aranua's threshing floor, and which, being lost in the destruction of their sanctuary, BC 588, has appeared in Ireland as the precious leg fail, brought thither by Hebrew men in a ship of Dan, circa 584. The same authority elsewhere advances the following. In Ireland, in the royal precincts of Tara, 582, 583 BC, or 583 BC, sorry, there was a Hebrew system and transplanted Jerusalem. There was a Hebrew system and transplanted Jerusalem, set up in a sort of abeyance and sanctuary, actual, operative, but unknown, real, but for some wise purpose kept out of sight. A throne set up by a Hebrew prophet, Jeremiah, reset in sanctuary. Some pious friends of the Anglo-Israel movement have desired a digging search over Tara, now a wilderness region, to discover the missing treasures from Solomon's temple. The romance connected with Tara we thus perceive still blossoming at the end of the 19th century. It began with the heathens, was discoursed on by Catholics, is reverenced by Protestants. We still dream and sing of the harp that once through Tara's halls. The rath on the slope between the hill of Tara and the river Boyne on the west was the site of the burial of the heroes of the Battle of Gavra. The grave of Oscar is still shown. We buried Oscar of the Red Arms on the north side of the Great Gavra. The palace of T-Mare or Tara was held by the Tuatha. The chief college of the Druids was at Tara. There was held the national convention of the Timorian festival. It was associated with the marriage sports of the Teltine. The foundation is attributed to the wise Olam Fodla. O'Hartigan of the 10th century, the author of the Book of Ballymote, spoke of it. Fair was its many-sided tower, where assembled heroes famed in story. Many were the tribes to which its inheritance, though decay, lent a green grassy land. He sang its praises under Cormac Ucusin, when it was a fortress, when, at banquets, 300 cupbearers handed round 3 times 50 goblets, which cups were of gold or of silver all. In Meath, said Holinshed, in a hill called the Hill of Tara, wherein is a plain 12 score long, which was named the Kemp his hall, where the country had their meetings and folkmotes at a place that was accounted the high place of the monarch. The Irish hammer, Manny fables in his forge, of Finn MacCoyle and his chieftains, but doubtless the place seemeth to bear a show of an ancient and famous monument. When Widow Phelan, the guide, wrinkled, freckled, wasted, wizen, bent at an angle of 45 degrees, hurried over the ground with the weight of 75 years to show us the wonders of Tara, she pointed out the plain 12 score long as the site of the far-famed banqueting hall. She told us of the vessels of gold and silver, served by 300 butlers. She could show no stone remains for sure. The palace was of polished oak. She gloated over the graves of 50 Croppies soldiers, and, seating herself on the turf, sang a long ballad of past glory, in which O'Connell was duly remembered in the repeal meeting on Tara Hill at which she had been present. Looking round upon 9 counties, she mourned the loss of Erin's pride, as an aged Fenian Druidess might have done. She said that some persons wanted to search the grave mounds over Tara's departed heroes, but that she had roused the villagers who drove off the sacrilegious party. To her patriotic ardour, the sanctity of Tara and its departed druids and princes may be safely confided. I'm sure they've done archaeology in that place already and found loads of stuff. Mrs. Wilkes reads in the Antiquity of Temora as the Teman of Edom, of Midian as the old name for Meath, or Padan Aram of Laban, of Levi now Luz, of Danans from Dan, of Jacob's pillow, Leah Fail, of the Irish genealogy in the first of the Chronicles, of the tablets of Druids being the peeled rods of Jacob, etc., etc., testifying to the glory of Tara. The old patriarchal religion of Chaldea was one with the ancient faith of Erin. So that's Midian is the old name for Meath. Padan Aram of Laban, of Levi now Luz, of Danans from Dan. It's interesting stuff. Lastly, and not to be forgotten, the association of the Holy Stone with Tara signifies a place above all in some person's estimation. Dr. Petrie discourses eloquently upon the bod Thergé, which bears, however, a surprising phallic signification. It is, says he, an interesting fact that a large obeliscal pillar stone, in a prostrate position, occupied until a recent period the very situation on the hill of Tara, pointed out as a place of the Leah Fail by the Irish writers of the 10th, 11th, and 12th centuries, and that this was a monument of pagan antiquity. An idol stone, as the Irish writers call it, will seem evident from its form and character. Tara, therefore, occupies no mean position in the history of religion in Ireland. Right, guys, that's been another hour. God, the hours just fly in, eh? So how many chapters did I get by there? Not that many. It was 3. Still got a few more left. But I'm going to end this stream here, guys. And I'm going to have a wee break, a wee coffee, and I might have another hour at this. So I'll just thank you all. No Mask, Ulick McGee, Epic, Miss Knows It All. How you doing, Miss Knows It All? Right, I hope you are enjoying this. I'll see you in the next reading. Cheers.